My boss handed me a paper that said I owed $10,000, money I never touched. He looked me dead in the eye and said, "Sign it, or else." My boss once handed me a piece of paper that said I owed $10,000. $10,000. Money I had never touched in my life. He looked me dead in the eye and said, "Sign it, or else." That's not how I imagined my week would go. Honestly, at that point, I thought my biggest problem was whether I could afford another overpriced coffee from Starbucks on my lunch break. But life has this funny way of turning boring Mondays into absolute nightmares. Let me rewind for a second. My name's Daniel, I'm 29, and I live in Chicago. Nothing special, just a regular guy trying to pay rent, chip away at student loans, and survive in a city where every little thing costs a fortune. I worked in a mid-sized financial services firm. Nothing glamorous. My job was mostly spreadsheets, client accounts, and too many emails that said things like "circle back" or "per my last message." The pay wasn't great, but it was steady, and for someone like me, no trust fund, no family connections, steady mattered. I like to think of myself as careful, maybe even boring. I wasn't the type to gamble money away or take wild risks, which is why what happened to me felt so surreal. From the outside, our office looked normal, too normal. A modern glass building downtown, shiny lobby, fake smiles at the reception desk. Inside, it was cubicle hell, the kind where you hear Karen from HR laugh at her own jokes way too loud, and the copy machine breaks down every 2 hours. But lately, I'd noticed things. Whispers in the break room, the CFO, a guy named Richard with slicked back hair and a smile that felt fake as hell, spending too much time behind closed doors. People carrying folders around like they were radioactive. And every so often, I'd notice numbers in the system that didn't quite add up. Money moving between accounts, small amounts missing. At first I thought it was just human error. Everyone makes mistakes, right? Still, something in my gut told me to stay the hell out of it. I wasn't about to play detective. Not my circus, not my monkeys. I just wanted to do my job, get paid, and go home to play FIFA on my PS5 until I fell asleep. But ignoring problems doesn't make them disappear. It makes them bigger. One Friday afternoon, I overheard two managers whispering near the elevator. I wasn't even trying to eavesdrop, but the words 10 grand and cover it up stuck in my head like glue. My heart started pounding, but I walked away like I didn't hear a thing. By Monday morning, I realized it wasn't just office gossip, because that's the day my boss called me into his office. Now, let me paint you the picture. Richard's office was this huge corner room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking downtown Chicago. Leather chairs, whiskey decanter on the side table, fake motivational poster on the wall about teamwork. The kind of place that screams power, even though everyone knows the guy inside probably cheats on his taxes. I walked in, and Richard was already sitting there, along with another manager, Thomas. Both of them looked way too serious. "Daniel," Richard said, smiling, "we need to talk." Those four words, yeah, they ruined my life. And that's where everything really started. Because what they handed me next would change everything I thought I knew about this job and about myself. Now imagine what happens next. But before that, smash that like button and hit subscribe, cause the craziest part is just getting started. Those words hit harder than they should have. Richard, my boss, leaned back in his leather chair, fingers steepled like he was some kind of mob boss instead of a CFO of a mid-sized finance firm. Beside him sat Thomas, another manager. He wasn't usually around for these kinds of meetings, which made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. "Sure," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "What's this about?" Richard smiled in that fake, politician way of his. "We've got a situation." He slid a folder across the desk toward me. I hesitated before opening it. Inside was a single sheet of paper. My eyes scanned the words once, then twice, then a third time because my brain refused to process it. It was a statement saying that I acknowledged responsibility for a missing $10,000 from client funds. I laughed, thinking it was some kind of sick joke. "This isn't funny." Neither of them laughed. Thomas just stared at me with cold, flat eyes. "This is serious," Richard said. "The money's gone, and someone has to be accountable." My stomach dropped. "You can't be serious. I didn't take anything." "No one's accusing you of stealing," Richard said smoothly. "But you're in the best position to absorb this. Think of it as protecting the company, protecting your team." I stared at him, then at the paper again. "You want me to sign this? To take the blame?" Richard's smile never wavered. "It's just a formality. A signature. We'll handle the rest. You won't lose your job." In fact, showing this kind of loyalty, it could work out for you in the long run. I wanted to scream, loyalty. They wanted me to admit to something I didn't do to ruin my own record just to cover their asses. I pushed the paper back across the desk. No way. I'm not signing this. Richard sighed, like I was a stubborn child. Then he leaned forward, lowering his voice. Daniel, if you don't sign, this becomes very complicated. We'll have no choice but to involve the authorities. And when that happens, your name is going to be all over this. Do you really want the police asking questions about you? The blood drained from my face. I felt trapped, like the walls were closing in. Thomas finally spoke up, his voice like ice. This isn't optional. We're giving you a chance to keep your job, to keep your future. You don't want to make the wrong choice here. My hands were sweating. My brain was screaming at me to walk out, but my body felt glued to the chair. I need time, I said finally, my voice barely above a whisper. Richard gave me that smile again, but it didn't reach his eyes. Of course, take the day, but by tomorrow morning, we'll need that signature. I left the office in a daze, clutching the folder like it was radioactive. My coworkers glanced at me as I walked back to my desk, but I couldn't read their expressions. Did they know? Were they all in on this? The rest of the day passed in a blur. My phone buzzed with texts from my roommate, from my sister, but I couldn't focus. All I could see was that paper. My name, $10,000. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat in my crappy apartment, staring at the document under the dim glow of a lamp. My cat jumped onto the table, knocking over an empty beer can, but I barely noticed. $10,000. I'd never even seen that much money at once. How could I be responsible for something I didn't touch? I thought about going to the police, about telling them everything, but what would I even say? Hey, my bosses want me to take the fall for missing money. Would they believe me? Or would they just see a signed confession and close the case? By 3 in the morning, I still hadn't decided. But I knew one thing: tomorrow, I'd have to walk back into that office and face Richard again. And the next morning, when I finally made my choice, I realized it wasn't just my job on the line, it was my entire future. I didn't sleep. I mean, technically I closed my eyes for maybe an hour. But my brain kept looping the same scene: Richard pushing the paper toward me, that little smile that never reached his eyes, Thomas staring like a courthouse statue. When the sun finally leaked through my blinds, it felt like a verdict. I showered, dressed, and stared at the document on the table. $10,000. $10,000 I had never touched, never even seen. I shoved the paper into my backpack and headed out. The air in Chicago had that late fall bite, the kind that wakes you up whether you want it or not. I grabbed a coffee from a corner shop, didn't taste it. On the train, I texted my sister. Jess, hypothetical question. What would you do if your boss asked you to sign something saying you lost a bunch of money you never saw? She called me immediately. Daniel, that's not hypothetical. I know. Do not sign it. She said each word like a small slap. Call a lawyer. Call the state labor board. Call me every hour if you have to. I talked to nobody official, I said. I don't even know how to explain it without sounding guilty. Explain it honestly, she said. You didn't take anything. Honesty doesn't always win, I muttered. After we hung up, I messaged Miguel, an ex-coworker who'd bailed from our company last year. Weird question: did management ever ask you to sign something sketchy? He replied a minute later, not me, but I heard rumors. Watch your back. By the time I walked into the lobby, my stomach felt hollow. The receptionist said good morning like every other day. The elevator ride was silent, just the hum of cables and a poster about integrity staring me down. At my desk, I pretended to work. I opened spreadsheets, moved cells around, watched numbers swim. 10,000. My phone buzzed: an email from Richard's assistant. Richard will see you at 10. At 9:58, I stood. Elena from compliance passed my cubicle and gave me a look I couldn't read. I swallowed. Hey, she whispered, glancing around. Be careful in there. You know something? She hesitated. Just be careful. Then she walked away like she hadn't said anything at all. Richard's door was open. He stood when I entered, extending a hand like we were old friends. Thomas sat off to the side, expression unreadable. Daniel, Richard said, I hope you had time to think. I did. He motioned to the chair. The document lay on the desk, this time with a sticky note marking a signature line. A pen waited on top, glossy and heavy, like it cost more than my monthly groceries. I want to ask a couple of questions first, I said. Of course. Why me? You're in the workflow, he said smoothly. You touched the accounts, I touched reports, I said. Not the money. Exactly, Thomas added. It's about stewardship. Accountability. I almost laughed. Accountability means lying? Richard's smile thinned. It means protecting the company, the team, the clients. I stared at the page. The language had shifted since yesterday. Now it said, I acknowledge responsibility for operational deficiencies resulting in a shortfall of approximately $10,000. A softer trap, but still a trap. I want a copy, I said. You'll get one, Richard said. We'll email an executed copy. I want a copy right now, before I sign. Thomas leaned forward. That's not how this works. I took out my phone, opened the camera, and hovered it above the page. Then this is how it works for me. Phone's away, Thomas snapped. Richard lifted a hand to calm him. It's fine, he turned to me. Daniel, there's no reason to be dramatic. I kept my voice even. There is if I'm putting my name on it. He pushed the pen toward me. Let's not drag this out. My hand shook. I pressed my palm to my thigh until it stopped. In my head, Jess said do not sign. Miguel said watch your back. Elena said be careful. Behind all of them, my rent said you need this job. Before I sign, I said, I'm adding a note. Richard's eyebrows flicked. What note? Signed under protest, I said. And today's date, written out. That's unnecessary, Thomas said. It's my signature, I said. My conditions? Richard studied me for a breath that felt like a year, then nodded, like he was indulging a child. Fine, I wrote slowly, each letter scratching the paper a little too loud. Signed under protest. November the 12th. Then I wrote my name. The ink bled a little, as if the page drank me in. For a moment, nobody spoke. Then Richard exhaled like a balloon deflating. Good, he said, all warmth again. You made the right choice. He slid the page into a folder with practiced grace and clicked it shut. We'll take it from here. That's it? I asked. My mouth felt dry. That's it, he said. Focus on your work. This will go away. Thomas stood, smoothing his tie. We appreciate your loyalty. The word made my skin crawl. On the way out, Elena appeared near the door like a shadow. Her voice was barely a breath. Get everything you can in writing. I tried, I said. They'll email a copy. Save it, she said. And Daniel, don't keep it only on your work computer. Her eyes said more than her words. I nodded and walked back to my desk, heart knocking against my ribs like it wanted out. The rest of the day moved like wet cement. People laughed near the break room. The printer coughed. Phones rang. The world pretended to be normal while something inside me tilted. At lunch, I forced down half a sandwich. When I came back, an email waited from admin records, attached a PDF of the signed document. I opened it. My handwriting glared back, signed under protest. November the 12th. My stomach unclenched a little. I forwarded it to my personal email, then to Jess. Then I saved it on a flash drive. Paranoid. Maybe. Alive. Definitely. At 4, a message popped up from Richard. Thank you for handling this professionally. Let's regroup next week about growth opportunities. Growth opportunities. I almost choked. When I finally left, the sky was already dim. I walked past the security desk, past the glass doors, into the chill. My phone buzzed with a number I didn't recognize. I let it go to voicemail. Then another text came through. No name attached. Good choice. No punctuation. No context. I looked up at the building, our company logo bright against the dark, then down at the message again. That night, I learned there's a special kind of silence after you sign something that can bury you in a colder one when you realize someone else already has your name. That night I couldn't shake the message. Good choice. It looped in my brain like a broken song. Who the hell sent it? Richard? Thomas? Someone else entirely? I sat in my apartment with the lights off, watching the glow of the city creep through the blinds. The signed PDF stared back from my laptop screen. My name, my protest, my trap. The next morning felt worse. Every step into the office lobby felt like walking into a trap. The receptionist smiled like usual, but I swore her eyes lingered too long. My ID badge beeped louder than normal. At my desk, coworkers whispered. I couldn't tell if it was about me or if I was just paranoid. Every laugh felt pointed. Every look burned holes in my back. Then Elena from compliance passed by. She didn't stop, didn't speak, just slipped a folded note onto my keyboard. My heart hammered as I opened it. Check your personnel file. Don't wait. My stomach dropped. At lunch, I snuck into HR system. I wasn't supposed to have access, but I knew enough workarounds. And there it was, the scanned copy of my signed statement, neatly uploaded under disciplinary actions, date stamped, official. It didn't matter that I'd written under protest. On record, it looked like I admitted fault. I wanted to throw up. By the time I left the building that night, I kept glancing over my shoulder. A black SUV idled near the corner. Was it just waiting for someone, or was it waiting for me? At home, I saved the PDF to 3 separate flash drives. One I hid under my mattress, one inside a cereal box, one taped under my desk. Paranoid, maybe, but paranoia was starting to feel like survival. At 2 a.m., my phone buzzed again. Another unknown number. Another text, "Stay quiet." I sat in the dark, staring at the words, realizing I was in deeper than I'd ever imagined. And the next day, when I finally decided to fight back, I learned just how dangerous silence and noise could be. The text "Stay quiet" haunted me all night. By sunrise, something inside me snapped. I couldn't just sit back and let these people bury me alive. I showered, dressed, and instead of heading straight to work, I called a lawyer. Not some big shot corporate attorney, I couldn't afford that, but an old college friend, Mark, who'd gone into labor law. When he picked up, his voice was groggy. "Daniel, it's 7:30 in the morning. Yeah, I know. I'm screwed. I need help." I told him everything. The paper, the threats, the signatures, the texts. He whistled low. "Jesus, man, they cornered you." "No kidding." "All right. First rule, don't panic. Second, save every shred of evidence. Emails, texts, even voicemails. Screenshot everything. I already have the document saved 6 different ways," I said. "Good. Now, listen. What they did is illegal coercion, retaliation, maybe even fraud. But proving it, that's messy. They'll spin it like you admitted fault voluntarily. And trust me, companies like this have lawyers who eat people alive." My chest tightened. "So I'm just screwed?" "Not necessarily," Mark said. "You need leverage. The question is, do you have anything on them?" Leverage. The word echoed. Did I? I thought of Richard's secretive meetings, the missing amounts, the whispers in the elevator. Maybe. Mark sighed. "Daniel, you need to be careful. If they realize you're digging, they'll double down. Don't play hero. Just collect what you can." I promised him I'd be careful, though I wasn't sure I believed it myself. At work, the air felt heavier than ever. Elena passed my desk, gave the tiniest nod. That was enough encouragement. I started small reviewing transaction logs I had access to. Most of it looked normal, but here and there were gaps. Transfers logged without descriptions. Amounts just under the threshold that would trigger compliance checks. It was like someone had threaded needles through the cracks of the system. During lunch, I met Elena in the stairwell. "You were right," I told her. "They filed that paper against me." She bit her lip. "I figured. They've done it before." My blood froze. "What do you mean, before?" 2 years ago, she whispered. "Different guy. Name was Michael. They said he made a mistake with client funds. He signed something. A month later, he quit. Nobody's heard from him since." The stairwell suddenly felt too small. "Jesus. Daniel, listen." She looked me dead in the eyes. "Get out. Whatever you're planning, stop. They don't care about you. They never did, but I couldn't just walk away. Not now." That night, I dug deeper. I stayed late in the office, pretending to work, waiting until most people left. Then I slipped into a shared drive where managers stored audit files. My hands shook as I copied folders onto my flash drive. Dozens of documents, spreadsheets, scans. Some of them clearly showed money moving into shell accounts. It was more than a mistake. It was theft. Organized, deliberate. At midnight, I shut down my computer, heart pounding. My phone buzzed as I left the building. Another anonymous text, "We see you." I froze on the sidewalk. Looked around. Empty street. Just streetlights and the hum of traffic. But someone knew. Someone was watching. I hurried home, locked every door, shoved the flash drive into a drawer. My head spun with possibilities: the police, the press, maybe even the feds. For the first time, I felt like I had a weapon instead of just being the target. But weapons can blow up in your own hands. I sat there in the dark, wondering if I'd just crossed a line I couldn't uncross. And when the company collapsed overnight, I realized the line had already been crossed by someone much higher than me. The next morning, I walked into the office ready to keep digging, but something was off. People were gathered in clusters, whispering. Phones rang nonstop. The usual fake calm was gone. Richard's office door was shut, blinds drawn. Thomas was nowhere. Elena rushed past me, eyes wide. "What's happening?" I asked. She shook her head. "Check the news." I pulled out my phone. The headline hit me like a punch: Midwest Financial Group under federal investigation, executives missing. My heart hammered. The article said subpoenas had been issued overnight. Millions, not thousands, had been moved offshore. Richard and Thomas, unavailable for comment, which was just a polite way of saying gone. I sank into my chair, staring at the screen. The paper I signed suddenly felt like a fuse that had burned out. I wasn't the scapegoat anymore. I was just collateral. My inbox exploded with emails, compliance updates, emergency meetings, HR reminders. None of it mattered. Then my phone buzzed again. A new message from another blocked number: "You're clear. For now, for now." That was the part that stuck. Because sure, maybe the feds were onto the real thieves. Maybe Richard and Thomas were already sipping drinks in some villa across the ocean. But my name was still on that document. My signature. My protest. I forwarded every file I had to Mark, the lawyer. He told me to sit tight, to let the investigation unfold. Stay quiet, Daniel. This might just save you. But silence felt dangerous, and noise felt worse. That night, I sat in my apartment with the flash drive in front of me, the glow of the city outside my window. My phone buzzed one last time: "Delete everything, or you'll regret it." I stared at the screen, frozen. Was it Richard? Was it someone higher up? Was it someone inside the investigation? I didn't know. All I knew was that I was holding proof of a crime, and maybe holding my own death warrant. And as the night stretched on, one thought refused to leave me: maybe I was already ruined. Maybe I was already guilty. I just hadn't seen the handcuffs yet.